welcome to yet another episode of the Carrytrainer Higher Line podcast. Oftentimes I start these episodes and I say we've got an interesting guest or an interesting topic. I hope so, because we're sharing it with you. Welcome to another episode of the Carrytrainer Higher Line podcast. Hey all, Mickey with Carrytrainer, and on another episode of the Higher Line podcast today, we are going to talk about getting the most for our children in their lifetime. I've got a friend of mine here, Frank Amato. We've been trying to get him on the podcast for years, actually, and he's dodged and ducked every request I've made. It's the second joke I've made with him today. It was me that was blowing him off. I was too busy and on the road. But Frank has spent years and years and years working with children that are diagnosed with things like ADHD and other such, conditions. That's what doctors call them, but you guys look at them differently, and you're helping these kids have the best life possible as they grow up into adults. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. I'm a board-certified cognitive specialist and director of brain balance of the greater Houston area with two centers in the Woodlands and in Katy. Recently was with Brain Balance of Southern Nevada down in Las Vegas, helping children and families and adults, by the way. The only two qualifications for brain balance is that you have a brain and you want a better brain. So we have an adult program as well as a child program.
So pretty much anybody that wants a better brain is a potential customer, patient, client.
Absolutely. So we've had people from 3 to, I think our oldest was 83.
Wow. You guys are not considered medical clinic. You're not, it's not going to a doctor's office or something like that when you go visit your place, right?
Yeah, we're classified as educational. We're a non-medical holistic approach that looks at the whole child, not just the label, because when there's labels, there's usually more than one label associated with the child. When it's the brain, it's never one thing. It's always 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 things going on.
We were talking before we began here. You and I, when we grew up, the way I remember it was there was always 1 or 2 kids. Like I can imagine them from 3rd grade, 5th grade. If my buddies I grew up with are watching, I'm not poking fun at anybody, but there was always the kid that probably nowadays would be labeled as autistic or something in that genre. But there was like 1 or 2. Now it seems like you go out in public anywhere, and it seems like these kids are 1 and 2, maybe 5 out of 10. Right? I don't know that to be true, but it just seems like that.
Well, when we were kids, probably 1 in 100,000 was autistic. Now it's 1 in 46 nationally.
1 in 46. So that 1 in 100,000, like where does that data kind of come from? Where did that?
Don't quote me on that, but it's something to that extent. No, you think about when the movie Rain Man came out, that was in the late 80s. No one knew what the word autism was. The whole movie was about, no one knew what this was. Even the medical doctor didn't know in the movie. So now everybody knows somebody who's autistic or has ADHD. It's epidemic, and no one seems to be upset about it. No one seems to want to do anything about it.
Other than the moms and dads.
Yes, and they're struggling every day to get their kid to the next day. Not let alone does my son have a future? Does my daughter, will she be able to go to college? Will she be able to get a job? Will I have to go to the job interview with her? Or will she be living with me the rest of their lives? Or they have these concerns. And nothing that the medical community can offer can appease those concerns. So that's what we offer.
From 1 person in a whole big city to now 1 kid out of 2 classrooms. What changed? So I know I'm hearing people say vaccines and screens and food and plastic and, I what is it?
So a lot of those screen time, like I said, when we were kids, we went out and played. We did physical things, hands in the dirt things. There was no alternative of going in our room and locking the door and looking at a screen for 6 hours. We didn't have
Mm.
that. Now they do. And generally, the kids that are doing that are the kids that are weak socially. So they go in that room to hide from social environments. So
Mm.
that's why they're on the screens all the time. So once we get them comfortable socially, we see the screen time go down because now they're able to interact with other kids.
Okay.
Now,
So, you know, I'm
as far
sorry,
as the
please.
etiology and the other things you were talking about, we hear a lot of kids changing after vaccines. I heard 3 stories on Friday alone. My child was fine and then lost speech after the vaccine. My child was fine. We had he had a high fever afterwards and lost gave us this faraway stare now all the time.
And you're not just talking about COVID vaccines from a few years ago. You're talking about maybe a 15-year-old kid that got childhood vaccines from normal gamut of vaccinations, right? I
Yeah.
have a
And I'm
family
just
member that has that exact story. He was this way and then had this 1,000-yard stare. This is a little kid, a couple years old, that after that was kind of just like staring off into space and non-responsive. Interesting. Go ahead.
the most heartbreaking one is a mother, a 14-year-old who had the brain of, I think it was a 4-year-old, and telling me that the last time she heard "I love you" from him was right before they went in and got the shot. And
Wow.
usually it's about two. Um, but I'm just talking. I don't know if this is what's causing it. I'm just telling you the stories that I hear. This is a totally non-judgment zone. So whatever they tell me is what I hear. But I hear that story a lot. That something happens at 2. It's usually the MMR vaccine. It seems like, um, and things change with some kids.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying all kids, some kids.
So,
So no, go.
you were saying earlier, being a kid years back, out playing in the dirt, dawn till dusk, fishing, riding bikes, sweating, throwing. Hell, my buddies and I, man, we would leave. My mom made us do chores in the summertime before we could do anything. We had to like milk goats, tend to chickens, cut the grass, and you'd race through that crap. And my buddies would already be hours into playing. They were all like spoiled rich kids whose mothers did all those things. But we we'd go chase them down, and it'd be 11 o'clock in the morning, and you'd be coming back in the summertime 8 o'clock at night. I don't remember leaving with like snacks, so we'd just be like, finding mulberries and shit to try to, like eat, or you'd sneak into somebody's house and be stealing crap out of somebody's pantry. But you didn't have water bottles, or I mean, that didn't exist, and you'd be
Well,
shoving your head into a garden hose in somebody's backyard.
bike helmets, things like that. I
Mm-hmm.
grew up in New York. What the trucks used to come through in the summertime with the DDT to kill the mosquitoes. There would
Oh
be a
wow,
big thing of smoke behind them as they go through the streets. We used to ride our bikes right in that smoke. We thought it was the best. Little did we know, did
that's
that all the
crazy.
time.
That's
Yeah.
crazy. So how would those activities uh, allegedly create a situation where we've got 1 in 100,000 versus 1 in 49 instances of autism?
Well, those are sensory things. We have to interact with something. We have to touch something. We have to see something. We have to hear something. So that sets up connections in the brain that need to be set up. If you're looking at a screen all day, those connections will not be made.
Mm.
That's all we do is we connect the brain. As we say often, a connected brain is a teachable brain.
You say we as in your organization.
That's what we do. Yes. Yes. Everybody else says the brain is the brain, and we're going to manage this brain for the rest of his life. We're going to manage the thoughts coming out of that child's brain. So oftentimes I'll ask a parent, would you rather your son have to think about not having meltdowns, or would you rather him just not have meltdowns? And they
Mm.
all say the latter. because when you're talking to a child, when you're counseling them, you're teaching them how to think about not having a meltdown. That's a big stress to put on a child. That's a huge ball and chain for them to carry instead of them just not wanting to have a meltdown because they see the big picture of life.
What's interesting. I was talking with one of my friends the other day, very successful business guy, martial artist, and we were talking about how we were talking adults, not children, but how in this modern world, people go out of their way to like create boundaries, like all these catchphrases. I have to have boundaries. Be like, people talking about bad family stuff. I only go home twice a year. I got to have boundaries, or that triggers me. That triggers me. So I don't do that. That triggers me. And we've now like made it okay where anything that doesn't make us feel amazing, we just like, yes, it's very healthy to just stay away from that. And I know that there are plenty of healthy things like that if there's plenty of healthy reasons for staying away from stuff. You get an abusive alcoholic parent that calls you names, probably a good idea to stay away from them. But like, I don't want to talk in front of people. That bothers me. So I'm just never going to do that thing. Like, sure, now your whole life, you're never going to do that thing. What are you going to do when your daughter gets married and you got to stand up in front of 100 guests? So we were kind of talking about that and how now children, it seems very more normalized to just, okay, you don't want to do that, you don't want to eat that, you don't want to go there, don't do it. And culturally we're doing that.
Well, because parents now have the feeling of being liked overcomes the feeling of being a parent.
Mm.
They want to be liked. They have to understand that, hey, being a parent, sometimes they're not going to like you, but you got to do it.
Are these conversations that you have with your parents?
I did today with someone today. Yeah, I did do that. We talked about how to deal with, because parents come to me, moms are crying because they're so frustrated with their kids. They're screaming and
Mm.
yelling. They're not being themselves because they expect they have an 8-year-old and they're expecting 8-year-old behavior, but that 8-year-old can't give them 8-year-old behavior. And so they're frustrated by that and they think that that's a conscious decision by that child, and it's not. That
Mm.
child's dealing with the brain that's in their head right now. So I talk to them about being less emotional, realizing that they're not giving you a hard time, their brain is giving them a hard time. And you have to see it that way. So, no, go ahead. Ask.
Not at all. I'm just the correlation to dog training. I'm not at all saying children are like dogs. I've got two friends that are professional dog trainers, and they say most of their job is not working with the dog, it's working with the dog owner. And again, not calling children dogs, but it's like the same thing. Like you're having to fix or rework how the parent is interacting with the youngster.
I just adopted a dog about 4 months ago, and he's 2 years old, and he is reactive. He gets extremely excited at times, and I grab him by this collar underneath and talk very low to him about calming down. So, and showing him that I'm in charge, I'm speaking in a low voice, but the same things we're doing with kids, we're not grabbing kids, we're getting down to their level. We're not grabbing them by their collar. I can't say that. But with him, I'm grabbing him, having him look me in the eye and just say, it's okay. His name is Handsome, by the way. He's a handsome dude.
I like it.
And then he starts to look at me. He's able to calm down. The tail stops wagging, and then he relaxes a little bit. And I'm going to keep doing that over and over again until he understands.
That's
But
cool.
with our kids, yelling at them doesn't, it only escalates the problem. They're used to people yelling at them. They're used to people talking down to them. You have to get down on our level, like we train our coaches, get down on their level, sit down with them, talk to
You
them in a
mean
low voice.
physically get on their level?
Yes, yes. Don't be over them pointing. They've had people doing that their whole life. We talked the other day about escalation in other scenarios like that.
So there clearly are some children, adults, humans that are uh, not just a developmental issue. They've got like some legitimate. I had a grandmother that was schizophrenic and she was crazy. She was not um, talking to her didn't fix things. She was violent, and that was 50 years of crazy experimental medical treatments and things like that through the 50s and 60s. That's not the type of person that we're talking about.
Well, I'll say, like I said, I'll say that the mental health problems we have as adults stem from a lack of brain development in childhood. And
Mm.
usually it's that birth to 5-year-old area because that's where the most brain development happens. So our program directly addresses that area to make sure the foundational pieces of brain development are there so that child can live as close to a normal life as possible. But if they're not there, that person will spend the rest of their life trying to um, uh, accommodate those missing blocks with medications, with
What are we talking
counseling,
about?
with therapy.
We're talking about coloring, playing with modeling clay. What are we?
Well, I can show you that too. I have that. I don't know, do we want to share the screen and I can show you some stuff?
Whatever you want to do, Frank. So earlier you were talking to me about the hemispheres of the brain, and I think maybe that's where we're
Well, you want to
leading
start there?
to. Wherever you believe that we should go.
Okay. Okay, you can see that, right?
Yes, sir.
So this is a brain of someone who is, let's say, an 8-year-old with an 8-year-old brain.
Okay.
This is a symphony orchestra, like I like to say, where everyone's playing the same music in the same key, and the music is beautiful. All right. There's two sides to the brain. They must be equally developed. When they are equally developed, they exchange information openly and freely between each other, constantly telling the other side what that side is up to. We call
Hmm.
this brain connected. Okay. Now, when one side doesn't develop like the other side, the strong side will overpower the weak side, cut off the communication. Now things on both sides start to struggle because of the decrease in communication. When that happens, the child's ability to learn, make friends, control emotions, behave appropriately, coordinate motor skills, comprehend details or the big picture. So if the brain was like this, the standard out there would be let's medicate, let's counsel, let's therapy, let's make teaching accommodations, by the way, that go away at 18, and then that child is left with nothing. Let's make parenting accommodations, all trying to manage what's coming out of this imbalanced brain
Go
without
back a
anyone
second.
trying to balance it.
Go back 1 second. I think what I just heard is you're saying that we take these kids, we give them special treatment through the education system, uh, whatever that might look like in a particular district or region of the country or world, and then all of a sudden they're an adult and they don't get those same, um, I guess I'll say luxuries or that special treatment from a boss, from whoever. Now they just got to deal with life. That's what you're
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah, if we teach a child to swim in 3 feet of water, and then we throw them in the ocean at 18, good things are not going to happen.
Mm,
So
mm-hmm,
this is a
mm-hmm.
way, the school, as I respect teachers, their job has become so much more difficult today as it was when we were kids. I respect what they do, but their only job is to get you to 18, thinking that that's the finish line, and it's not. It's the starting line. Every child that comes in here as young as 4 and 5 years old, I'm thinking, how is this child going to be at 25? Is they going to have all the options open to them? Are they going to be a good husband, a good father, independent, a good provider, whatever it may be?
Mm. What does so this uh, discussion that we're having here about brain development based on this uh, kind of overview, looking at these kids as they come in, is that what creates a treatment plan, or is it kind of one size fits all?
It's an initial assessment that they go through. It's a 90-minute assessment, and that tells us what blocks are missing that we need to fill in.
I see.
What will the home exercise program look like? What will the in-center sessions look like? What will the nutrition look like? All of that are parts of this.
Very cool.
So there are two sides to the brain. the left side of the brain, and you'll see this with a lot of kids, is very strong, but the left side of the brain is very detail oriented. Kids that they like the details in things. They notice details. They notice when their mother takes a different route to the store than she normally takes. They can pick it out. Sometimes they like to take things apart, put things back together. We see such a huge interest in robotics and such a huge interest now in coding and things like that, which would fit into a strong left brain. Verbal, they have a good vocabulary. Small muscle control, handwriting, tying shoes, buttoning, zipping things, holding utensils. IQ is a left brain function. Memorization skills, numbers, letters, the parts of things again. Asking repetitive questions, left brain. Logical, analytical thinking. But the left brain hates one thing more than anything else, and that is change. It likes things to be the same thing over and over again. Repetition, routine. Watching the same show, episode, movie, video over and over again. Listen to the same song. Vocal tics, physical tics. Conscious actions, memory and learning, short-term retention of information, auditory processing, the brain hearing what the ears are hearing, linear and logical thinking. The left brain is the go, 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 the impulse to do things, the hyperactivity, the fidgeting, which is why we call it the gas pedal. And kindergarten, first grade, and second grade depends on this part of the brain for learning, because it's about memorization, learning to read, ABCs, 1, 2, 3s. Which brings us then to third grade, which is our most popular age for kids, because the learning changes. It changes from learning to read to reading to learn, and big picture skills, and comprehension, seeing the forest for the trees. Now it's not about numbers anymore. Now it's about word problems. Now it's not about memorizing facts. Now it's about understanding concepts, division, multiplication, things like that. Nonverbal communication, being able to tell when someone's joking with you or kidding around with you, not having to be so literal with that child, reading body language. This is why COVID set us behind so much, is because everybody had a mask on and you couldn't see what their facial expression was, so kids couldn't develop this skill. Large muscles are controlled, the right side of the brain. Balance, equilibrium, coordination, core muscle strength. Okay? Emotional regulation, right side of the brain. Expressing emotion, suppressing emotion. Those two things are very closely tied together. If a child can't feel their body beneath them, their sensory motor system, they have difficulty feeling and expressing emotion. For instance, you never see any autistic professional athletes. They don't exist because sensory motor skills are what they're weak in. And most therapies, most mainstream therapies, if not all, are going to say, okay, let's live our lives, let's build our lives around that. Let's not address that. Let's just work around it. Let's send them to coding school. Let's send them to robotics. Instead of saying, nope, we got to get him out there on his bike. We got to get to do a hike with him. We got to go. He's got to sign up for these sports, all those things.
I mean, there's got to be some value in, like, if I'm 5 foot tall, aspiring to be the next, Michael Jordan might be a long shot. I guess you got guys like Spud Webb or dudes like that make it, but like, there's got to be something to be said for supporting the strengths, right? And channeling those things to a good outcome for life, right? So how do you, like, it's probably an easy trap to say I'm focusing on this kid's strengths and not his weaknesses. Like,
focusing on the strengths is only about day-to-day regulation. Let's get them. How do we get them to the next day? Because parents have other kids to be concerned about. They have spouses to be, so they feed into the strengths just to make the day as calm as possible. But there's no long-term growth that comes of that. I'm not saying they have to be a professional NBA player. I'm just saying they have to have some kind of, as you would have, I'm sure agree, some kind of muscle tone and some kind of strength, some level of fitness, instead of laying on the couch all day playing video games.
Agree.
So brain balance here, we feed into the weaknesses of the brain so that they have as much, their brain can develop the proper way. Those older people who are riding scooters in the supermarkets that you see, Once you give up your legs, your brain is done.
Mm, that's
Never
true.
give up your legs.
I've got a friend, a side note on that, professional athlete, NFL. He was an actor, and that's now he works uh, doing physical fitness and things like that, training for people in his age group. He's in his 60s, and that's like his number one thing. His speech is, "Do you want to have help off the toilet every day?" Yeah, like do some squats every day. Do your squats. Keep your legs working.
Yes. The more muscle you have on your body, not only the healthier, the longer you'll live, the healthier your brain will be.
I dig it. That makes sense.
Okay.
So we were in this point of talking about emotions. Um, I think what I was hearing you say is we I heard you say suppress as well as feel.
Stress is way as feel.
Suppress,
Yeah.
like talking
Oh,
about
suppress.
like
Right. Feeling emotion or suppressing emotion. A lot of kids are non-affectionate. They don't want to give anybody a hug. They want to go near them. They don't want to say, "Dad, I love you," because they don't feel it properly. They can't
mm,
communicate their feelings properly because they don't know what it feels like. Once we develop this part of the brain, that all changes.
I see. I see. Well, that's
Oh,
an interesting thing.
mom's crying. He told his father he loved him yesterday.
That's a
We hear
real
those
story.
stories all the time.
That's an interesting thing. I've got a sibling that to her emotion is like, you can't tell me how to feel, right? And that's real. uh like, you can't tell me how to feel about grandma dying. I have a different experience than you, or you can't tell me how to feel about, you got to get out of bed and watch every sunrise. No, I don't. Like people have different ways of feeling. This song makes me laugh. This song makes you cry. This song makes me want to shut the radio off. But I think what you're saying is that there are some parameters where it is normal behavior for the human being to kind of act. I'm sure it's like a maybe a swinging scale. There's people that are less emotional or more emotional, but there's like a correct and incorrect way of moving through that flow of emotions. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Am I on the right track?
Yeah, again, it comes down to brain development.
Okay.
Okay. The way, so I don't know okay. So the way I explain this a lot of times is, I coached football for a long time and I'm very right brain. So I always have a left brain coach, assistant coach, who while I'm calling plays is whispering in my ear timeouts, distance, what down it is, all those things, so that I can make the final decision. Because the left brain is about gathering facts, gathering data, the education part. We always have the person who, when they keep going to college, they have 3 masters, 2 doctorates, when they keep going,
Mm,
but they don't never apply it in the real world because that's the right side of the brain that was never developed properly. So they do what their strength is which is education and memorizing, and they leave out the other part of the brain, which is the maturity part.
mm.
So let's say a child who's 8 or 10 who's like that, I would say, a lot of times the parents will say, you know what, he's 10 years old, Frank, but if you didn't count his intelligence, he acts like a 7-year-old.
Mm.
Because it's not about the intelligence part, it's about the other part, the big picture part of the brain, where we make our final decision once we get perspective by taking a step back.
Mm.
Don't people A lot of will equate intelligence with brain ability, and yeah, it's part of it, but it's not the whole picture of it.
Yeah, I think we've all met somebody that can like draw you a diagram of a jet engine or something, but they can't friggin' look the waitress in the eye to order their soup.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. These are the things you'll see in a child. Left brain, right brain weakness is what things will be common, and I'll tell you that by far, right brain weakness is much more prevalent. If we have one left brain weakness every 2 or 3 months, that's a lot.
So kind of go through these a little bit. And is this is pretty broad stuff here. This isn't just autism or ADHD. This is what?
So autism and ADHD are always a right brain weakness.
Okay.
Some of the smartest kids we have are the most autistic kids we have. They have intelligence. They can memorize everything. You saw Rain Man. When there was a scene in Rain Man where he's at the doctor's office and the doctor says, "You know what, Raymond?" He goes, "I've heard about people like you." He says, "What's 4,628 times 3,212?" Comes up with it right away. Tom Cruise says, "Man, this guy's a genius." He says, "Raymond, what's the square root of 4,648?" Man, because this guy should be working for NASA. Then he says, "Raymond, if I gave you $1 and you bought a candy bar for 50 cents, how much money would you have left?" $100. If he pointed out the window, he said, "One of those compact cars out there, how much do they cost?" $100. The first two questions were left brain questions. The second two questions were right brain questions. And that typifies a typical autistic brain. So I show parents the right side of autistic kids and I say, is this the kind of brain you want to manage, or do we want to improve this side of the brain? Because if you want to leave it alone and do the therapy and the counseling and the meds, that's not going to change this part of the brain. It's only going to manage him. Or do we work on developing these parts? And they can choose what they'd like to do.
We've all heard somebody say, like, I'm not a good test taker, or math, I hate math, or fill in the blank. I didn't particularly enjoy math at all in school. I actually have a very low level of math education. I was homeschooled for most of my life, but I taught myself to do pretty advanced algebra and geometry to do arches and ellipses and things like that in the construction trade. Because if I couldn't do it, I couldn't build the thing that the architect drew. But I find this stuff fascinating, but I always thought, oh, I'm just not good at this as a child. Like, people do have aptitudes, right? Like somebody, like I see left brain weakness, poor math skills. Does every human have to have good math skills? If they don't, does it mean they have an underdeveloped left brain? Maybe they just suck at math.
Right. It's like saying, but everybody's going to have something wrong. You go into a gym, they're not going to tell you, "Hey, you know what, Mickey, you're too strong. You don't need to come in here anymore." No, we always have something we can work on. And brain balance is not about, I would like to go through a 36-hour adult program that I'm starting to put together. I want to go through 36 hours. Balance, equilibrium, things like that I can work on. So we can all use more work. All this place is really is a gym for your brain.
Okay. So we find out where you got sweet biceps, but your quads are weak. You've got amazing triceps, but your calves are skinny.
Right. Right. So let's work there. And are we going to make you a bodybuilder by strengthening those calves? Maybe not, but you're going to be what your genetics will allow you to be.
Okay, I dig that. Will you
Okay, we all want the best brain possible. I hope we all do.
I do. Yeah. Will you go through some of these, like side by side, or however you would present this? I want to just understand better what we're looking at.
Okay, so I usually start with the right because that's the area that's involved. So the child is awkward, clumsy. They bump into things. They don't pay attention to things. They walk in a very ungraceful way or run ungracefully. They're hyperactive. They're anxious. They're moving. They're fidgeting all the time. Teacher says they're getting up and down from their desk all the time. They can't sit still. I see it in here when they're in the lobby with me. Impulsive, lacks focus. Okay, runs out in the street, doesn't realize there's a danger out there. They could get hit by a car. They don't understand the big picture. They lack the focus because they're not interested. Kids will only do what they can do. They won't do what they can't do. And then they'll try to manipulate themselves, by the way, out of doing the things they can't do so they don't show you that they have weaknesses. Lacks emotional control, has meltdowns. The littlest thing sets them off. Throws themselves on the floor, throws things, punches walls, hits other people. Very unemotional, could the other side of it. Very unaffectionate, doesn't want to be hugged, doesn't want to hug anyone. Poor reading comprehension. Not being able to, they can read okay, but they can't comprehend what they're reading.
So
And a
they
lot
can
of
read the
time,
words, but they don't. It doesn't
right,
jumbles up
because
in the brain.
reading is on the left side of the brain. Reading to learn is on the right side of the brain. So the parent might say, Frank, when I read to him, he understands completely, but when he reads himself, he doesn't understand. So that's telling me that their auditory system is more mature than their visual system. They could process things better through their ears than they can through their eyes. So what the mainstream way to do that would be, let's get an IEP, an individualized educational plan, and let's make sure the teacher reads all the questions to them verbally.
Hmm.
No, that's not helping them. Let's go address the core issue, which is their eyes communicating with their brain seeing what their eyes are seeing, and let's make that happen, because we can't depend on things verbally our whole lives.
Makes sense. Yeah. Got to walk through an airport, see street signs.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just had a 7-year-old who couldn't read when he started. We did the 6 month after we were finished after 6 months, and mom said, "Oh, we just came back from Disneyland. He was reading every sign in the park
That's
because
cool.
now he can." Kids will only do what they can do, and they're confident.
I like that.
Um, Poor communication skills, difficulty expressing a clear thought or feeling. Hey, how did your day at school go? Oh, it was okay. What'd you do? We opened a book, and not being
Hmm.
able to express themselves properly. Obsessive repetitive behaviors, watching the same show, episode, movie, video over and over again. Tics, things they like to do repeatedly, having to be warned of something that's going to be happening. Okay, Frank, in 15 minutes, we got to go to the store. Okay, Frank, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, Frank. Instead of
Hmm.
just saying we have to go to the store, let's go. Because they have to make sure that transition is right, or else the child will have a meltdown.
Hmm.
Allergies, skin allergies, seasonal allergies, right side of the brain. Lacks interest in team sports. Yeah, I'll do swimming, I'll do martial arts, great things, but the team sports are what really change things because they teach you how to be part of a team. And it's the
Hmm.
social aspect that's introduced there. Misses the big picture, doesn't see the forest for the trees, doesn't get the moral of the story, doesn't understand the concept of consequences. You know what? I keep getting punished for the same thing over and over again, and they keep doing the same thing because they don't understand how consequences work. Poor eye contact, not looking at you when you're talking, gazing, looking around. Not being able to look in the camera when mom's trying to take a picture.
Hmm.
Space invader. They come right into your personal space. They don't respect personal
I
boundaries.
was waiting for that. I was like, what is this? The video game? Okay, so
No,
literally,
you're showing
literally,
your age now.
literally the Space Invader. So
Space invader.
it's interesting as you're reading through these. I'm thinking of children and also adults. That I know that
Yes.
do these things, and then some of these things I'm seeing like, man, do I do that? Is that I'm remembering myself as both a child and kind of seeing some of these things as an adult. Go ahead.
I have a 77-year-old uncle that's a space invader. We're walking through the casino in Vegas when I was there, and I turn and he's right there. There's no 3 feet. There's nothing. He's always right on top.
Get off of me.
Speech delay. Okay, all those things are right brain weaknesses that any parent of an autistic child or an ADHD child is going to will recognize.
Okay.
The
So last,
strengths.
go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, you have
And
something that you want to ask?
no, you, please.
Okay. The strengths on the left side that most autistic and ADHD kids are very good at is they're good at math, they're good at numbers, they're good at addition, subtraction of numbers, they're good at verbal skills, spelling skills, um, fine motor problems. They really don't have much of. Sometimes they have handwriting problems, spacing, size. One letter's big, one letter's small. By the way, there's never one child that's all one side. It's always a combination of both because of the miscommunication, the disconnection in the brain.
Hmm.
Poor letter recognition. Not their B's turn into D's. Okay. Unable to follow multi-step instructions. You give them 3 things to do, they don't remember. They have to come back and keep asking.
Mm.
Weak immune response, gets sick a lot. Poor memory for details, misses small details. Low self-esteem, lack of motivation, gives up easily when they hit a roadblock. A lot of kids like this, autistic kids, ADHD kids, if they're not immediately good at something, they will quit. There's no sense of long-term change, that if I practice, I will get better. They don't understand that. They want to be good right away, which is why they gear themselves towards video games, because they can be king of the hill there.
Ah.
And they all want to be king of the hill in something. These kids don't like to play sports because they're not usually athletically inclined. And the ones that are will only play as long as they're the best. Once the other kids who are more coachable come up to their level or greater, they tend to quit. Task avoidance, avoids homework, doesn't want to do that. School, doesn't want to go to school. Again, they will manipulation is the subconscious tool they use to get out of doing the things that they're weak in, that they don't want you to know that they're weak in. They get very good at that once they're teenagers, as we all know. Poor auditory processing, not processing what you're hearing properly. So again, usually the child we see is stronger on the left side and weaker on the right side. Any questions about that?
I'm looking at this and I'm seeing a lot of correlations to symptoms of abused children, physical, sexual abuse, things of that nature, violence in the home at a young age. I'm sure these things go hand in hand, but I'm sure they're disconnected as well. You might have a child that exhibits a bunch of this behavior that's not autistic. So you're looking at this big picture, right? But like, I'm assuming this abuse thing probably comes up quite a bit, I'm guessing.
Physical trauma, chemical trauma, emotional trauma stops the brain's proper development. So yes, and where there are those things, there's also going to be a lack of sensory stimulus for that child. That child is going to be in front of a TV watching YouTube for 14 hours a day. They're not going to be out playing and running around, going on the playground, riding their bike, taking a hike with mom. Chances are they're not doing that. We get a lot of adopted kids for that reason. Parents do this wonderful thing, the loving, the most highest calling of things. They adopt, they save a child, and then they find out this child is tearing the house apart, fighting with the other siblings, doing all those things that because the brain never developed properly. Russian orphanages, we get kids from Chinese orphanages, Ethiopian orphanages, where the child's laying in a crib for 23 and a half hours a day.
I remember a study I read a couple years ago about these kids, the 23 hours a day as infants, what they looked like as adolescents and teenagers, and then adults, like super disconnected because they didn't have the touch of mom's face and breast. They didn't have the eye contact with mom or a caretaker because they were just kind of like checked on to make sure that they were breathing and get a diaper change, and that was like the only interaction. And it's pretty astounding what becomes of us without that.
Well, what I said before, the mental health problems we have as adults stem from a lack of brain development in childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the point.
I'm sorry.
How much what?
How much of this can be reversed or adjusted? I mean, I know some stuff is habitual versus like some hardwired thing. Like, somebody's got a problem being on time or something. That's a habit that you can pretty easily adjust. But some things like, I don't know, looking at some of this stuff, some of these things, are they just like your makeup, who you are, or can you affect every one of these things?
You can always get better. The brain can always change. There's a great study that just came out about the effectiveness of our adult program that's on our website. And no matter how old you are, you will see change. Connections will be developed. Connections that were lost will be reconnected. As we get
Pretty
older, like I
fantastic.
said, things change. So it's
What's
never
this,
too late.
what's this looks like for a child or an adult? Like, what's the treatment or education look like?
So this is that brain development that I was talking about from birth to age 5, the most critical, crucial time. All the blocks need to be there for that child's brain to develop to its full potential and live the life they were meant to. Um, it's harder and harder that things are happening that way, though. This is why at age 5, they tell you it's time to take your kid to school because the brain should be ready to be successful in a classroom, academically, socially, behaviorally, if all the blocks are there.
Mm.
However, if they're missing, as I often say, if your brain was a bucket, there's holes at the bottom of the bucket, and it's the teacher's only job is to pour water in that bucket. That's their only job. Parents' job: pour water in the bucket. Morals, values, lessons, ethics, discipline. And if everything happens correctly, the water stays in the bucket. If this didn't happen correctly, though, the water falls through the holes in the bottom of the bucket because the bucket never had a chance to fully form. So brain balance is concerned with the bucket. Everyone else out there is concerned with the water.
That's interesting. There's nobody else doing this kind of stuff?
Not to any uh, not to any degree as we are.
Okay. Okay.
Everybody's dealing with let's manage what's coming out of the brain.
Makes sense. I mean, I'm not saying that makes sense, but it makes sense what you're saying. That's kind of what I've seen and heard from people. Continue. It's interesting.
It could be medication, it could be biofeedback, it could be um, um, counseling. Matter of fact, talking to somebody depends on them to have an age-appropriate brain to understand the big picture of what the psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever is trying to teach them.
Mm.
If they don't have that brain, I don't care how good that practitioner is, it is not going to work the way that it should. If the brain is not working to its full capability, the speech pathologist is not going to get the results they should get because the major control center is not mature enough to do that.
Mm.
The physical therapist, the occupational therapist, whatever it may be, everything there depends on the brain.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So once the way I get relationships with those practitioners is they call me and say, you know what, Frank, I've had this child for 6 months. We've really gotten very little done. And he's been with you for a month. And all of a sudden we see a lot of change because we're working with the root cause. Those things are all great and they're helping that child, but not to the extent they should be able to help them if the brain was functioning in an age appropriate way.
Mm. Talk about medication a little bit. I know you guys you're considered educators, but like I remember some kids growing up. One of them was so heavily medicated. It was, in my recollection, abuse. The amount of drugs that these people fed into this kid, and it ravaged him. It gave him these crazy uh, tics and behaviors, like uppers and downers, basically, to kind of make him palatable for the family and for school. He's an adult with a family of his own now, but and I'm not knocking mom and dad. I mean, they were trying to help their kid. They went to a doctor. This is what the doctor said to do, so that's what they did. But
You're right.
that and you and I aren't doctors, right? Like that's why we have experts. If I need my transmission fixed, I'm not going to my grocery store. You go to the transmission guy and you see these things and we get better as adults, right? I think some people hear these, or as humans, people hear these conversations and they get mad and they're like, F the medical field. I don't know about that. Like my grandmother, I mentioned earlier, had like early shock treatment therapies and things like that, or some of my family members, they speak about the doctors like they were these evil people, when in reality it's like these psychiatrists and doctors at that time, they were trying to figure something out. Before that, they just locked these people up in white suited institutions that were basically prisons and let them shit themselves and chew on checkers until they died. And they medicated them and tied them to beds and put them in padded rooms. So I don't want people listening to think personally myself, but the intention here isn't like the medical field's bad, they've got it wrong. But there are things that maybe we've gotten massively wrong because, like you said when we started, 1 in 49 kids now. So full circle back to my point, like drugs and things like that, how's all that fit in? You guys aren't prescribing or telling parents, I'm assuming, to stop using drugs. So comment on that stuff.
Yeah, no, we don't get involved in that conversation. Some parents start on with their kid on medication, some don't. It's whatever they choose to do. I always tell them, if you have any questions about that, that's something you and your pediatrician, psychiatrist, psychologist, that's between you guys. It's not involving us. We're looking to build that brain. That's what we're good at. That's what we do.
Are you guys
But
seeing children that are
but
on
there are
meds?
times if 14-year-old, 15-year-old wants to kill themselves or whatever, is doing stuff. Yeah, medication. Yes, immediate emergency. We need that. But we also have to think of, what about long term? We know this medication is not a long term solution. What are we going to do for a long term strategy?
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Are you guys seeing clients, kids, adults getting off of prescribed medications?
Yeah. Again, they talk with their doctor and they ask about that. I said, we don't tell you when to get off. That's up to you and your, like I said, you and your medical doctor, and you choose how you want to do that. If he thinks it's, or she thinks it's okay, then we're all for it.
Is that something that comes up a lot? I'm probing this because I'm just, that's, I'm sure the goal for any of these parents.
Yeah, it does come. It comes up. It comes up.
Okay.
We get a lot of parents though initially that just don't want to do it. They were told to do it and they don't want to do it. So they're looking for a way around that.
They're told, put your kid on these meds, and they're saying, I don't want to.
Yeah, and the meds are really for the teacher, probably, to try to, so that child can behave in a classroom.
That makes sense.
It's not
I got
really
a
it's not really so much for the kid and the long-term benefit of the child.
I got a buddy that's a pharmacist. He's got to be mid 50s. Super cool dude. And we were talking about Adderall one day, and he said that, and don't quote me, anybody listening, but my recollection, he was saying when he was in school to become a pharmacist, that they had a discussion with a professor specifically about Adderall, and it was so prescribed so little at that time that they said if somebody came in with a prescription for that, no matter what, always call the prescribing doctor to verify it because it was such a controlled item. And he said now every 5 minutes they're
Candy.
processing an order of this stuff from little people to adults.
There was a shortage, I know, for a while.
That's crazy. I mean, I've known tons of adults that were addicted to it. I shouldn't say tons, but multiple people. I'm kind of naive to that kind of stuff. I never was into recreational drugs. I don't like. I took an aspirin yesterday, which is maybe like once every year or two. And people will say, yeah, man, I was on that shit for years. Couldn't you tell? I don't know. I just thought you were, like that you were just a really, aggressive go-getter. I don't know. And it seems like, I mean, that's human nature, right? We want a quick fix. Give me this thing I can eat. We see that with weight loss drugs and steroid treatments to grow muscle fast and things like that. But yeah, that doesn't just like make kids better.
There was a study done on us in 2019 by Harvard Medical School. Martin Teicher, who's a psychiatrist there, the head of pharmacology, guy that gives medication for kids struggling like this. And they studied us, and he included in that study, not only to showing the long-term benefits of brain balance specifically, but he included this. ADHD is characterized by a triad of symptoms: inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. And they're in adulthood, if it's allowed to go into adulthood, a tenfold increased incidence of antisocial personality disorder, fivefold increased risk of drug abuse, 25-fold excess risk for institutionalization of delinquency, ninefold increased risk of incarceration. I'm 16. I'm thinking like a 12-year-old or 11-year-old, and my friend Mickey, who I think is pretty cool, is asking me to do some things for him. And you know what? I know they're wrong, but Mickey's my only friend, and I'm not good socially, and I think Mickey's pretty cool. He's asking me to do these things, and if I don't do them, Mickey's not going to be my friend anymore. So you know what? I'm gonna do them, and I get caught. Am I a bad person? No. Did I make a stupid, immature decision? Yes. So the prisons are filled with people who are making immature decisions, not bad people, just people who made stupid, immature decisions. That's why I would love this application to that.
Decisions are criminal, though. Like, there's young people. I'm not disagreeing with you. They might be immature, but like if you do something violent against another person, and maybe that's not what you're talking about. Maybe you're talking about shoplifting or something like that.
Well, let's say I'm 22, but I'm thinking like a 15-year-old, and I see a 15-year-old girl.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? That's where my maturity level is, and I think everything. I don't see the big picture of that. And something happens, and something's misconstrued, and I'm all of a sudden bad things are happening to me, as they should. So I'm just saying is that a lot of times that's happening. We see a lot of teachers now with kids and things like that that we never saw when we were growing up.
Mm. Oh my God, it seems like every freaking couple of days I see a lot of women now. You never saw
Yes.
that. You'd always hear of like the creepy coach or math teacher groping the girls softball team or something. But it seems like once a week now that there's this 30-something-year-old fifth grade
Yeah.
teacher that's having sexual relationships with 12 or 13-year-old boys.
Yeah. I never heard of that before. And so, like I said, we misplace intelligence with proper brain function, and it's a
Mm.
part of it, but it's not all of it. We see kids on college campuses doing crazy things. They're very highly educated, but they're not seeing the big picture maybe on some things. They're just regurgitating what they're hearing
Mm.
without
Mm.
filtering it properly, without independent thinking.
Excuse me. Do you have more slides to show?
Um, nope, I think that's it.
If not, I was going to say go ahead and pull that down so I can pull the regular screen back up here. What's treatment look like, or the re-education? I don't know if it sounds kind of like 1984-ish.
Well, when we enroll, we do a welcome meeting where we sit down with the parents and we go over what we're going to do. We go over the results of the assessment. We show them what they're going to do at home with the child, what we're going to do in center. Usually, the center program is usually 3 times a week for an hour after school. There's also a home program, so we can do it virtually also if they live further away from the center, we could do that. We give them access to a registered dietitian, so they have one-on-one Zoom calls with the nutritionist, so their child is getting the right fuel to their brain to speed up the rewiring that we're doing. We'll give them access to our portal that's got all the webinars, exercise videos, recipes. And then we set up a plan, and they're going 3 times a week after school, doing the home exercises, doing the nutrition. And our average program is probably in the 6 to 9 month range.
Okay. Now you said adults come. So some adult decides that they want to better themselves and their life. They show up and do an assessment just like a child would.
It's a different assessment, but it takes about an hour. We do that assessment. And then we recommend a course of what a program. Generally, we start with a 16-week program.
Okay.
Where they come in once a week in center, and then they do 3 to 4 sessions on their own. We give them the equipment to do everything at home. with
Well,
nutrition they get, the whole everything else they get like everybody else gets.
very cool. How often do you see adults?
Well, you mean in center or totally?
Just in general, like how often are adults deciding that this is something that they want to do?
It's working with adults is a little more difficult because they're like those kids, but I have no parent to override them. They're procrastinating. A lot of adults will sign up, will pay the money for the assessment, and then not show up, which is typical procrastination of what a child would do in the same situation. So a
Mm,
lot of times I have to tell them, listen, no matter what, just take the first step. Take that first step, do the assessment, and we're going to sit down and we're going to talk. Okay. And I'm going to listen to what's going on for you. And you have a choice. Do I want these struggles to stop, or do I want to continue to have to manage these struggles?
I
But we
like
get
that.
a lot that whenever they come in, I always say, hey, you got further than a lot just by coming in the door.
That's that's nice to think about. That's like what the white belts are told at jujitsu. It's the biggest decision is just showing up, putting that white belt on.
True.
It
The
is.
first step.
I should probably do it. Get my brain balanced out. Is it weird that I'm drinking rum with my coffee as we're doing this? I'm just kidding.
No, yeah, I know you're not. I know it's bourbon, not rum.
No, I would drink rum over bourbon.
Wow.
Yeah, good rum though. Good rum. But that's derailing us. It's super interesting stuff. When you first told me about it, I was fascinated by it. Uh, this idea of, for me, I subscribe to the Stoics, right? And we too often, especially in this modern world, are we disconnected from the realities of the world. I am like filled with anger every day, looking around and just watching people. I was at a beautiful restaurant last night, wood fired pizza. You'd love the place, top notch, like top 100 restaurants in my life that I go to. Primo. The pastry chef brings us this thing she's making, this amazing chocolate thing to try. You know, there's lovely people, textures and smells, and it's just an amazing experience. And you look around the restaurant, and 95% of the adults sitting at this nice white linen with this beautiful atmosphere, jazz playing, the whole 9 yards, are staring at their freaking phone. And it's, yes, that's your right to do so, but it's like, what the frick is more important? And I get it. You're a doctor. You've got a patient that's just got their arm cut off, or you're the business owner. But even if unless it's like life and death, I have a friend that's very successful. If he watches this, he'll know who I'm talking about. And he always says, I'm working. I'm working. Yeah, but like, you just are connected 99% of your life. Like, nobody stays in their office all day long. And now you just do that. Like, we used to go home from the office, and maybe the office would call. It's Bob at the factory. The XYZ milling machine broke and you had to run back in, but you didn't just connect all day, every day. It's disgusting.
Yeah. The eating is a big thing also. Um,
Talk about that. What do you mean?
Probably picky eating is the number one most common struggle with kids that are struggling with ADHD and autism. They only eat 4 or 5 things,
Hmm.
and that's a sensory issue. So we have to overcome that sensory issue. And that goes back to what you and I first connected on, which was when we were in the class and you were talking about that startle reflex.
Hmm.
I think we were talking about that. And when you're learning firearms, having a startle reflex is not a great thing to have. You're going to pull something before maybe it's the right time to do that. And that
Mm-hmm.
startle reflex is an inborn reflex that you have that should be gone by the age of 1. Okay, it's meant to be self-preservation. Something's coming my way, my eyes get big, my arms go out. I'm startled. I'm reactive in the moment. My brain's not working yet, so I'm not saying, "Oh, you know what? It's my dad. He loves me. He's not going to hurt me." No, I see a bigger person coming at me. I'm going to startle to get out of the way because those reflexes are there because that brain is not developed yet to the point where it can make the decision. It takes about a year for that to happen.
Hmm.
So the startle reflex is there for self-preservation. And when that remains with the child and doesn't go away, that child lives in a perpetual state of fight or flight, hyperactivity, up and down emotions, not being able to stay still when they're learning. And as we reduce that reflex and get rid of it the way it was supposed to at 1 year old, that child begins to calm down.
That's
Okay?
interesting.
They get out of that fight or flight mode. So retained primitive reflexes are a big part of what we do.
Dealing
Rooting
with
reflex.
dealing with those retained. What is this with the jaw?
Rooting. A mom who's breastfeeding will rub the baby's cheek. The baby will turn to eat. When that reflex remains after the age of 1, that's associated with speech inhibition, speech delay, articulation problems, wanting to put things in their mouth, chewing on things, chewing on fingernails, putting fingers in the mouth, putting pens in their mouth, doing things like that. Picky eating. When the taste buds can't taste the food the way it was meant to, the signal doesn't get to the brain because that reflex is blocking it from doing that. So we have to get rid of that reflex, allow the brain to connect into the mouth, and then those things tend to get much better.
It's so interesting. And all of these things, we all have seen these things in hundreds of people, and if you pay attention.
Palmar reflex. If I put my finger in a baby's palm, they squeeze. That's if they grab onto something, if they fall. A lot of people still have that reflex, so that grip is very weak. You want to shake somebody's hand and it's like a wet fish. You want to hold a firearm and they don't have the grip to hold the firearm the way it should, because that reflex is still there and it blocks the brain's ability to make the connections into the fingers.
Nice to meet you.
Right. We see a lot of kids that do that. And that's one of the first things I do when I go out and I meet the child. I put my hand out and I see how they squeeze my hand. So then they have trouble with writing, and they have trouble with buttoning things and zipping things and they hold utensils all, like this, and they're eating food like this instead of holding it the way it's supposed to.
So interesting.
So that's a big part of it.
Go ahead.
The retained reflexes is a big part of what we do, getting rid of what's there so that they're not keeping the brain in a survival mode. They're gone so the brain now can develop to its full potential.
Which, if they're living in a survival mode, then they've got a whole host of other issues like high cortisol. It's probably an increased instance of diabetes, things like that. That's a whole nother animal. Do you have opposition? Medical community at large often doesn't take kindly to organizations or people creating ideas that go against the flow. And that's been true of any scientific community from the dawn of time. The Earth is the center of the universe.
Right. Well, my last family was two medical people, doctor and a nurse, husband and wife. So they understand this because it's just a different way of looking at it. They realize there's nothing on that realm that will address this. So they go by then our reputation. They see that we know what we're talking about. We understand things. And so we have a lot of children of doctors, OBGYNs, internal medicine, lately, the ones today. So, but there are some, of course, that there's no research on that. That's expensive. But again, we're the ones getting the results. Someone asked me, why don't you listen to the doctors? I said, if they got better results than we got, I would listen to them, but they don't. I want to listen to the person that gets the best results.
Where did the methodology, where did it come from? Why doesn't modern medicine know about this?
Because it's not pharmaceutically driven, I would think. It's not, therapy driven. It's not lifetime driven. This is about making a one-time change.
Okay.
Dr.
So
Robert
I heard it's
Melillo.
money.
I don't know that for a fact, but Dr. Melillo had a son that was struggling, and he was, like I said, a chiropractic neurologist, and he He said, "Well, I'm not going to take anybody's word for this. I'm going to go research on myself." And he put together all research that was all out there. He didn't have to do, and he put together his program based on that research. None of that was proprietary. The program we have is, but he just put together all the research. Now he's done a ton more research than 18 years ago, of course, and he put together the whole brain balance program. And there's been 75 of them, and we're flourishing. And if we weren't good, we would have been closed a long time ago.
That's cool. How many people do you think you guys have helped over the last almost 2 decades now? Any number on that?
Probably, well, a few years ago they were talking about 50,000.
Wow.
I would think maybe 70,000 at this point, because I know places are busier than they ever were.
What's crazy about that is based on the numbers that you're telling me, that's just a tiny little drop in the bucket. Damn.
Small.
Change is hard, man. You get any like we humans, we find, my buddy Z and I talk about this all the time. We want the path of least resistance. We find the thing that kind of works. We can just ride that rut or swale, and we all develop patterns. I get up, I make my coffee, I read the paper, or nowadays surf the internet, and you just like go through life like that. And then grandpa dies and you find his stack of newspapers, and you know what I'm saying? And it's like you just see this person's life funneled into these patterns and activities. It's hard to change that. You want it. It's, as a parent, it's hard to change that. I was just joking with a friend of mine that just became a new dad, and I was telling him about my son, who's now 25, 26, that when he was born, and most parents have situations like this, I'm like, oh, this kid's going to be a karate expert. I'm going to teach him Russian and like French, even though I don't speak those languages. And he's going to learn, he's going to learn like how to dance. And like, it was really me just thinking as a child, I wish somebody taught me all this cool stuff. And of course, in reality, we did some Cub Scouts, and I taught him to fish and shoot some guns, and, like, did normal things. Like, these big grandiose ideas don't come to be, but it's so easy just to like let life go by and not strive to be better.
And sometimes it takes my daughter having a drug overdose and wanting to kill herself. Then I have to go. Then I'll pay $10,000 a month to bring her to some rehab place.
Damn.
It takes that emergency situation to. We just had somebody like that recently, and they decided they didn't want to enroll in this, and then they come back after they did that and said, well, we just had to do 6 months of $10,000 a month to this place in Utah to do rehab. And I think they were here maybe 2 years before that when I told them what this was going to look like. And this would have been a ton less expensive than that.
That sucks. And that's some life altering stuff. That's not just a bad day at work. That's life altering stuff. That's brutal.
And it didn't work. And it didn't work. And that's why they were back in center. So I'm just saying is that the time you put in now, the problem may be small now, but that's the time to get it, because it's going to get bigger. The kids don't grow out of this. It changes. The outside presentation changes as they get older, but it never goes away. They don't grow out of it. You got to put energy into the system for it to change.
Thermodynamics, baby. It's true. So, I dig it. How do people find the organization? I know they're not everywhere, but you've got 75 facilities now.
Yeah, brainbalance.com is the website. Put in your zip code. You can see what center is near you. Even the centers that aren't near you, if you don't have one near you, we could do the home program, which is, like I said, we do all your sessions at home with an iPad. You have a virtual coach. We send you all the equipment. You have access to the nutritionist and all of that, and we can do the whole program while you're at home. Maybe 4 to 5 sessions, 40 to 50 minutes each a week.
Do you do the consultation via like a video chat or something?
Yeah, we could do a different kind of assessment online. Or a lot of times they'll take a trip in to do the assessment in person, and then we can do everything remotely after that. We have people in other countries.
That's cool. I don't want people listening to this. First of all, I'm not a patient. I'm not paid by you people. I didn't want this to come off like it was a sales pitch for your product. Because that wasn't the intention, but that's where you work. I think it's anybody that says that it's not an issue with these kids is not paying attention to kids, which maybe is part of the problem. But it's staggering how many. I mean, it's. I said it earlier. It seems like every other person I know is directly connected to a child with autism now. It's staggering. And then you think, where are we going to be in 40 or 50 years as all those youngsters are adults? Not everybody can code. And like maybe that is the world. Maybe that's what takes us to 1984 is we're all just coders now. I don't know.
You're never going to find the best athletes coding.
That's true.
Okay. So is coding good? Yeah, it's great. But there's also got to be physical activity to go with the coding. Let's do both. Let's do both. Let's move around. Let's be physically fit and do coding. Let's be physically fit and do robotics.
It sounds like there's a big connection to fitness here, which I dig. That's a big part of my life and the program that we do at Carrytrainer. Not that we're teaching people that, but at least trying to motivate people to do that. I don't think you got to be Mr. Olympia or a triathlete, but no, don't need anything fancy to do push-ups and air squats.
Absolutely. The more muscle you have on your body, the better off you are.
I like it. Final thoughts and words from you. If you don't ever meet any of these people, Mr. Amato, what would you leave them with?
Well, it doesn't have to be brain balance, but when you're dealing with these issues, just think about, am I addressing the root cause of the problem, or am I just addressing the symptoms of the problem? Just ask yourself that question with whatever therapy is recommended for you. And then hopefully maybe there is somebody out there, I'm not aware of it, that will handle the root cause, and let's develop the brain. Let's work with the brain. We know it's coming from the brain, but you never hear the word mentioned. All these parents have been diagnosed with 14 different diagnoses of the kids. Brain is never mentioned. The word is never virtually mentioned to them. But we all know it's coming from there. So you want to deal with the root cause. Do whatever you can do to deal with the root cause of the problem. There's some great books out there. One book is called Back on Track. Dr. Rebecca Jackson, a great book. Just came out last year. Highly recommend this book. This will talk all about the hows and whys of the program, what things to look for at what stages in your child's brain development, so to know that your child is on track the way they should be. Are they crawling properly? Did they crawl in the right time frame? Did they walk before they crawled, which is not a good sign. You want them to crawl first. Did they like to line things up before the age of 3, toys, cars, whatever it may be, by color or by size? That's a red flag. So you want to look at all of these things. And the book that started all the brain balance centers is called Disconnected Kids. And that's in its 3rd edition. And that's an incredible book also. So those 2 books I would highly recommend.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You folks that tuned in, if you've got questions, comments, throw them in the comments section if you want to get a hold of them directly. Web address again, sir?
Brainbalance.com. My email is F as in Frank, A as in Apple, M as in Mary, A as in Apple, T as in Tom, O as in Oscar, the number 2 at brainbalance.com. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you have.
I like that. I appreciate you, man. I appreciate you taking the time to do that. You guys that tuned in, be well. Don't be dickheads. Tell somebody you love them. Peace.
Visit our website, Carrytrainer.com, for information about classes held throughout the U.S., Carrytrainer apparel, and upcoming projects. You can also email us at training@Carrytrainer.com for information about setting up your own private course or speaking engagement. Training@Carrytrainer.com or Carrytrainer.com.
Well, hold on. We're back. Frank said he had one more thing to say.
I just wanted to thank Mickey for everything that he's shown me. Mickey made me extremely uncomfortable the first time we were together, and it was that uncomfortableness that made me get better and improve. And that's why I always say to have progress, you must be uncomfortable. You can't. I was comfortable before that, and everything I did before his class, but he made me uncomfortable, and I'm thankful to him for
Well, nobody said that you had to have pants at a shooting class.
that.